Okay, great. All right, so well, as of all of you know, and as far as the course curriculum is concerned, today's the first topic, which is thinking like a psychological scientist. And my major intention in today's class will be to tell you how to think when you're trying to do psychology as a science. Right? I mean, pretty much in line with what we introduced the course with. I'll not really cover a specific topic today, but I'll cover a more generic perspective about how you have to think or how you should think if you are thinking like a psychological scientist. So this is more like when you're doing an activity as a professional, you have to put on some kind of a hat. And the problem with psychology is there's a lot of folk psychology, and everybody thinks that they understand psychological terms. Many of the times it's not so true. So I will cover some important ideas that can help, take some examples, and in the process try to appreciate what is different when you think as a scientist versus when you think as a layperson. It's particularly peculiar to psychology because the terms are very naturally used in everyday speech. That is what makes it a little more difficult to disentangle what is scientific and what's not scientific, which is not true for many other areas of, uh, including social science, many other areas of social science like economics. Nobody really talks about hardcore economics topics every day, so it does not have that problem, but for psychological science it does. And some of the stuff are also intuitive, and many a times it's also true. It's not like all our intuitions are wrong, but many of the intuitions are also wrong. And that gets tested from doing some kinds of activities which you have to be trained for to do as a psychological scientist. Okay, so the biggest issue that I think is there, by the way, this is the link um, here, NOVA project. And if you click here, this is the reading for today's class. So every single class, I will have this links, which these are the same links that's there on your course outline, so that you all can read as we progress. Please don't keep the readings towards the end. That's true, I think, for most of the courses you take. It just becomes a bothersome activity for all of you. And if you go back and read and you have certain questions, we can take them up in the next class just before the class starts. So I'll keep about 5 minutes or so every class. If you raise your hand, there are some questions, I can clear them up. So you should read while we progress. All right. So the one of the biggest modern issues, which was not so much true in 60s and 70s and 80s, specifically about the world in general, but also from our psychological science, because that's where we limit our discussions into this course, is this overwhelming amount of information that we have access to, or that's kind of right there in front of us. And this has lots of advantages. I think information is very useful, but it also has a lot of disadvantages, including, as all of you are aware of, things about fake news and clickbaits and other kinds of conspiracy theories, and a lot of commonsensical talk, which may or may not be true. So, I start off with one very broad question. I'm assuming many of you are interested in people when you're taking a psychological science course. So have you ever wondered about these kinds of things that we do? So these are seemingly mundane. This is what we have been doing maybe from the time we have evolved as Homo sapiens. There's also a lot of history about from where we come and all that, which I'm skipping for the moment. But let's say, something that we are doing for at least about 50, 60,000 years. So we yawn, we hunt, we make decision errors. Decision errors are not recent. Decision errors are something that we have always made. We also help each other. And by the way, we are going to cover many of these things in the course. And we also, in modern days, decide about complex problems. I say modern days to mean days in which we have a society, and we have other kind of social systems, including technological systems, and a sense of community, a sense of economics to where purchase as a word makes sense. So this is what I call a modern times. But there are things like yawning, for example, which we have always done. For 60,000 years, we have yawned, actually more than that, because species beyond Homo sapiens, like Homo erectus, for example, also has yawned. And we know that now. So it dates back about millions of years, actually. And we are still doing it. So have any of you wondered what and why do we do the kinds of things that we do before, or before taking the course, or read something somewhere else to start off with today's discussion? By the way, this course is partly, at least my part, partly broadcasting mode where I talk, but I also want to give a lot of space for you all to talk. So anytime you will have an idea, you'll have a question, you'll also have a comment to make, and you have a disagreement with me, please feel free to raise your hand, and any of the TAs will ask you to speak, and then go ahead and speak. Okay, so let's make this not so top-down kind of a thing. Although this is a large class, we will have space for many voices. Right. So anything that y'all have ever thought about why do people do kinds of things, or why do people think about certain kinds of things? Anything from anybody to start off with?
So I know specifically about yawning. So may I say that?
Yes.
So generally, sir, when we are tired, sir, we do not breathe as much. So the level of oxygen, we do not breathe as much as we are when we are active. So to increase the level of oxygen, we yawn so that it is at par with the normal rate when we are not that tired.
Okay. So from where did you get this knowledge?
Sir, I might have read somewhere. I don't know if it's totally or not. I might have read somewhere.
No, that's fine. So sorry, I mean, nothing personal. I'm just trying to understand, or trying to go towards the point I would want to make about how people come up with different theories about how our minds and bodies work. So that's from where I was asking. But yeah, so somewhere where you don't really recollect the source, but it's kind of there in your head, right? So that's what it is. Does anybody, or did you go and check it? I mean, any other source where you wanted to double check? There are other people. So for example, dogs also yawn, right? We also yawn just after we are out of bed. Some people at least yawn when they are out of bed in the morning, or whenever you go to sleep. So would this
Sir, may I
explanation
say?
explain these possibilities also?
Sir, may I say something?
Yes, please go ahead.
Sir, when we yawn, we open our mouth wide apart so that a lot of air can be breathed, and it could means replenish the loss of oxygen that has happened in our body. It might be a reason so that we can
Yes.
inhale a lot of oxygen.
Right. So again, same question. So from where have you known this? Is this a hypothesis to test, or is this a known scientific fact?
Sir, it's a known scientific fact. I read it in a newspaper a long back ago.
Okay. Fair enough. So do you trust newspapers as sources of scientific information?
Yes, I do, because I believe that they are the most authentic and genuine sources of information as they are being published. And I, on a personal level, don't have anything I can do testing or something to test the facts that they publish. So I simply do believe them without making any.
As long as journalist is not putting up his personal belief.
Yeah.
You have internet actually.
Sir,
Yes.
Rachit also has a question. I mean, he's raised his hand.
Yes, please go. it doesn't show me the names when you all speak, so don't
Yeah.
mind if I'm taking names.
Okay, sir. And I also agree. I've heard that same thing that when that we yawn because of some lack of oxygen in our body, and so yawning is supposed to increase that oxygen in the percentage of oxygen. But I have also read somewhere long ago that the yawning is influenced by when the fact that other people around you are yawning. So if you have people around you yawning, that can make you yawn as well. So with that would actually, it might not, it might sometimes maybe it contradicts the idea that the lack of oxygen is the only reason for yawning. Because if you are making people around you yawn and that can make you yawn, then it might not have always to do with the oxygen thing. So I'm not completely sure of which fact is true. So I'm skeptical about them still.
Yeah, fantastic. So we are of course, this is a very biased crowd to say you are already in a technological institution, and we are all supposed to be at least more biased towards using science and technology um, as knowledge systems to explain the world. But still, you see quick observations. Number one, the first theory about oxygen seems to be running across people. So clearly there is a lot of information about that as an explanation of yawning in the culture, double quotes culture, and this is which I mean the information culture. So whether it's right or wrong, none of you bet on, right, at this point in time. But it's the same thing that all the three of you read somewhere. So clearly there is some kind of what we call later I'll go. It's called community of knowledge, where the whole community has some kind of similar hypothesis about the world, but you are never sure whether it is scientifically true. That's one observation, and that's a very dangerous thing. Okay, but we live in such a world. The second thing is, Rachit, was it the last person who spoke? You already put your leg into science where you're trying to test it out and saying, okay, can both of these statements be together true? And it seems contradictory. So clearly one of them, or we need more sentences essentially to make sense of how we yawn, right? So such a simple thing as yawning is complicated to understand. Now, what do we do? Or rather, let's go to a slightly more less mundane things. So why do you think we make decision errors as people, including people who are knowledgeable or people who are intelligent? Why do we make these decision errors? All of us make decision errors. Not all. All is a very strong word. So a lot of people, including me at least, make decision errors. But why are we doing it?
So there are quite a few hands. Should I read out the names?
Yes, please. I mean, you can go through some sequence.
Yeah, right. Mohit Kumar.
Yes. So my question is different from what you have just asked. I was raising my hand already. I read through the article that we are supposed to read for the next class, but there is a term anecdotal evidence in the particular paper. I wanted to ask you that after what is it really possible that a particular anecdotal or an anecdote can become a reality or become the truth that people follow? Is
Yeah,
it possible? Is it ever possible?
Mohit, if you could kindly hold back to that, because I think about 2-3 slides back, I have that as on the slide, so that time we will discuss it.
Okay, sir.
Okay, please remind me that time. It's an important, very important question that you asked.
Akash Singh.
Yes, sir. Sir, I want to say about the making decision errors. Sir, making decisions is totally a personal activity. So we can't say specifically that every human or every citizen of a population will have a same mindset or have a same perspective about how he makes decisions. So this creates a diversity in how people means and how means people perceive that problem or that statement, and how they and finally how they make decision. So different perceptions are bound to exist, and only one or two might be correct, so others have to be wrong. So this creates decision errors. Some are correct and some are wrong. This I believe, sir.
Okay. Yeah, that's a pretty good starting point. Akash is your name, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Akash, but think about one aspect about many of the things that you talked about. If everybody has a different mindset and everybody has their different reasons to make a decision, can we ever study decision making then? You don't have to answer right now. Think about it. Right? If you want to study it scientifically, and if you start out with an assumption that everybody has their own baggage or their own whatever reasons, and everybody is thinking in their own way, and everybody here, if you really take everybody or individual very seriously, then it is every single person, which is billions of people. Or if there is some kind of similarity, still it's thousands of groups, or millions of smaller groups of people. So how can we ever study some kind of systematicity in how people make the errors then? It's, think about it. I mean, you don't have to answer, but other things, I mean, I understand what you are saying, and it's true that, when you talk about the decision itself, of course, we have multiple alternatives, and technically only one is correct, but that correct part, you may or may not have full information to make the decision at that point in time to say whether it's correct or not correct. And even if you do, it might turn out later on in the future that it was not a correct decision. But at that point in time, you really did not have the information that unfolded over future. Right? So, for example, even big decisions like lockdowns, we know now when the lockdown decision was made, it was made with some kind of information. But the the nuances of the decision unfolded after a couple of weeks or a couple of months, or maybe uh, the effects still are running through different facets of the society. So um, these are, of course, large-scale social decisions taken by governments, but even smaller decisions about, let's say, which mobile phone to buy. At some point in time, you took a decision, but you might figure out after 4 or 5 months later that it was not the best decision that you made. But you did not have the information of 4 or 5 months at that time. That's one part. The second is, if think about what if everybody has their own reasons or rationale to make a decision about a cell phone. Then you as a company, what kind of an advertising strategy would you make then? If everybody is, uniquely thinking about their own way. So there is some balance between individuality, or in what we call individual differences, and some kind of systematicity, which is what runs through a large number of people for us to make a sense of this as a science. Otherwise, and that's not just true for decision errors, this is true for everything that you study in psychology. And you can't really say that every single person would come from their own unique mindsets. We are not so unique at all. In fact, there's a good saying that the funny part or the sad part is we are actually not unique. Most people are similar. It's not, we always try to feel or think that we are unique, but there is enough amount of scientific evidence to show that what is called coherentness, that a large number of people behave in exactly the same way. So people are really not, very, very unique from each other. Although experientially we might think that we are, but behaviorally we don't show unique behavior. So that's some kind of starting comments. Are there any more things for people to add? Any more hands up?
Yeah, sir, quite a few.
Oh, okay.
Around 6, 7 hands.
Okay, so all right, so yeah, let's hear.
Okay. Tanya.
Okay. So I want to say that decision errors can maybe be because of the person's mindset at that point of time. Maybe he's in some feeling of anger or ego, that can lead to decision errors on which that person will lament after making those decisions.
Okay, so Tanya, here is one quick question back to you. So if anger makes a person behave or decide in a specific way, would you think that if you bring in 200 people who are angry, they all the 200 would behave in the similar way for that kind of a decision?
So I think anger influences the decision, and it depends on that person that how differently they'll behave.
That's what I'm asking. So let's say we have 200 angry people, okay, 100 males, 100 females, just for the sake of argument, right? And all the 200 people are making the same decision. Would you predict that because all the 200 of them are angry, they will make the same decision error? Or you say that all the 200 people will behave in the 200 ways to make a kind of to about this decision?
So I'm not very sure on this, but I think that it will have a similar trend.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's fine. Please feel free to start out with your thoughts and your intuitions, so you don't worry about being correct now and even later on in the course, but start to think critically about psychological science. I think that is what is the message that both me and Dr. Yogdan would want to share with you all. Yeah, so Tanya, you already see the previous point I was making there, and others also, I hope. And so there has to be, or there is probably a way to test this kind of possibilities. Both of these are possible. Are we going to see some kind of similarity in the way those 200 people are going to make the same decision when either they are angry or we make them angry through some kind of manipulation? So then anger does this to a certain kind of a decision. But if all 200 people are doing, 200 ways of that decision, then we have a big problem there. Well, not problem in the sense that there is really nothing much you can say at an aggregate level. Everything is then at an individual level. And there are different fields of psychology that deal with, heavily focused on an individual, and I will have more to talk about it. You can even focus on one single person and still do psychology, or you can focus on hundreds or thousands of people and do
Your
psychology, and you
voice
can
is
focus on the whole
breaking.
culture. Whenever I speak fast, I think it breaks. Sorry, so I was saying that you can focus on one single person and do psychology, or you can focus on tens of people and do it, or on hundreds or thousands, and sometimes even on the whole culture and do it. So there are different ways of doing psychology depending on, how many or on what kind of granularity you want to focus your analysis on. And all of that is under the burden. Yes, who is next?
Urvi.
Yes, so sir, making error might be because some people don't change their thinking according to time. So the solution which they find to a problem might not be relevant right now because some old theories might have been changed. So
Okay.
that's lead to
So
errors.
what do you mean by theory here?
Like the solution to a particular problem might have changed with time. So the solution which was earlier very efficient might not be that efficient right now. So
Oh, I see.
that
So it's a knowledge barrier then, right? If I come to know about the newer knowledge, then that should help me become a better decision maker, according to this.
so that, and also some people might not want to change that.
So in fact, there is a word called status quo bias, which says that people essentially want to stick to what they are doing or to stick to the older alternative without, even if there is a need or even if you have information that you should change, people typically don't want to change. So status quo means maintain the status. So yeah, that's true. I mean, that does lead to many decision errors for people. Yeah. Pallavi, next person. Is there anybody else in the? I just don't see.
Yes, sir. So I think that this
Tanish.
what. So I think that this is what people label decision errors is that they have some, let's say, expectation or an event that they want to happen, but because of certain circumstances in the world, they do not end up happening as they thought they should have happened, right? So they label themselves, these events label themselves as decision makers. So for instance, I don't know if it is actually true or not, but I think that there is there is no event which exists that the probability of happening it would be absolutely 100% or absolutely 0%. So it is always a probability game. So a person who is who wanted to do something, he can never be. I think that he can never be sure whether he would be actually end up doing it. So let's say a small thing like, let's say, traveling in Delhi using two-wheeler. You want to go to, let's say, from Delhi to Faridabad. There is almost 100% probability that that person would make it. But let's say if you happen to choose that route in which he or she happens to have certain accident, then he would label that decision as bad decision. So or even and same with, let's say, any very so-called impossible event like breaking a record in Olympic, the probability of thinking that person that decision would happen would be closer to 0%, but not absolutely 0%. And between these two extremes, the probability of particular event or expectations lies. So for any person, that may or may not happen depending on various different circumstances as to regarding that event.
Right. So, this essentially, and you're right, whatever you said. So this also implies that the error part of the decision is contingent on the outcomes, not on the decision per se. Right. So, which has been argued by some theorists actually, that you label these things in the future, not exactly when you do it. Okay, so let me proceed a little bit, and then we can take some more, hear some more people, just so that we cover somewhat. So see, the simplest thing to do, or at least the simplest thing according to me, is to Google. Now, problem is, and this is actually a screenshot. I don't know if this is still true. This really showed up on my computer screen at some time. When I search why do people, this is exactly the first thing that Google suggests is yawn. And apparently, obviously, if you know how Google algorithm works, at least search algorithm works, they do work on search volume. So which means that it is, from here you can say that at least at that point in time, a large number of people across the world was interested in why do people yawn, or why do people smoke, or um, why do people hunt. And you see that many of these things are pretty archaic, or something that has been there across millions of years of human history. Climbing mountains. Nobody says, why do people go to IIT? Very few people would ask that, and that too perhaps in India only. But why do people yawn seems to be a much more interesting question for people. Or migration, or smoking. And you see that almost all of these are actually behavioral aspects of human behavior, of humanity. So clearly, there is a lot of interest across the world in human behavior, and justifiably so, because we are interested to understand what we do. The issue is, how do you explain that behavior? And that is what I want to critically, elaborate in today's class. So, there are two things. One is knowledge, and the other is the illusion of knowledge, or illusion of knowing. So you might actually know something, like for example, when you started out in the class, when you were talking about yawning, and the illusion of knowing, because you might think, oh, I know it, but actually if you're told to explain, then you figure out that no, there are a lot of gaps in my understanding. Some people at least figured out, at least the smart ones figured out, that there's a lot of gaps in my understanding. And that people have shown for very simple things. So Frank Keel, for example, had done this classic experiment where they asked people, do you know how a bicycle works? And most of the, and this was, I think, Yale University. So you would think smart people go there. So he asked, do you understand how a bicycle works? Most people said, yes, of course I know how a bicycle works. And most people actually bicycle, as many of you in the campus, right? But then the next thing was, okay, explain me how a bicycle works. These were not all engineering students. It's not only an engineering school. It's a public university. Not a public university, a private university. But if you ask people to explain, and I don't know whether that might be true even in our campus, there was a lot of gap in people's understanding of how a bicycle actually works. And then people were told, okay, draw a bicycle, focusing on the critical parts, mechanical parts of the bicycle. And most people drew all kinds of weird images. So he said there's a different levels of or depths of understanding, and most of the time we think we understand, but actually we don't. And this has been extremely a big problem for fake information, as you might know, or misinformation, to be a more unbiased term. So the problem really is that we have an innate sense of trying to find cause and effect relationships. We want to explain the world in forms of causes and effects. So this caused that. Say, for example, our yawning example. Lack of oxygen caused yawning, right? Or the contagion thing that you mentioned, that seeing other people seeing other people yawn makes me yawn. So what we are doing really are trying to find a causal chain of events. Events can be small or events can be large, but we as a mind, or as a human mind, are hardwired to find cause and effect relationships in everything that we do or everything that we think. Now that works, or of course it has worked a lot. That's why we have all these very complex knowledge systems that we create. When I say knowledge systems, I mean all forms of knowledge, not just scientific knowledge. I also mean religious knowledge, ritualistic knowledge, voodoo knowledge, oral traditions, everything, because all are different knowledge systems, and we can argue and agree and disagree which is better than the other, and all have its own axioms of worth. So, but most of them typically would give you cause-effect relationships, including ritualism, by the way. But what is consistent across knowledge systems and across human understanding is we want good stories. This is what I think even Yash Raj once said. People want a good story. When you go to a film, you want a good story, or you want a good film. So what's a good story? A good story is a coherent story. You start with something, you end with something, and you seem to at least understand how you move from the start to the end. We dislike movies which suddenly stop at a break point, or it suddenly stops at a point when you were expecting, okay, what is the future, or how is this character going to act next. There are great movies like that which stopped suddenly, but people don't like it. In fact, it never makes it to big box offices. Similarly, in life, or in explanation of the world, including the mental world and the physical world, everybody wants coherence. Be it physics explanations, be it chemical explanations, be it biological, or be it psychological, or even economical. So this belief, this is more like a belief that the world is coherent, and hence I can tell a good story about these are the causes and these are the effects. In fact, that is what you expect every professor to tell you in every course that you take. Right? Think about it. I mean, from as diverse from humanities to engineering to management to design, we want to hear a coherent class. We want to hear a coherent explanation. And a coherent explanation is something which nicely ties the causes and the effects. But we have a slight problem in that. Who is doing it? So that is what we call source credibility. So Google Scholar, for example, which you see on your right, is a more is a subset of Google, or is a subset of world knowledge, which essentially archives articles which are published in journals, not newspaper articles, not articles written in different kinds of blogs by anybody. It only archives peer-reviewed articles. Peer-reviewed means when I write something, somebody who is knowledgeable in my field, at least more than one person, reads it and testifies that whatever I'm saying makes sense. So that way you have formed a community of science which is believable because other experts have also read it and ratified it, compared to a blog or a newspaper which nobody really ratifies. So we never know whether that source is credible enough or not. But we don't go to Google Scholar, most people don't. We just stay in Google. And of course, there's the WhatsApp and other kinds of stuff there. So quantity versus quality is the essential part. And that's why you have all of these other issues now, which has boomed with internet, which is fake news and clickbait and stuff. But the problem for us really is a lot of it actually talks about psychological aspects or psychological phenomena. In fact, if you end up searching for some um, weird video on YouTube which has to do with a psychological concept, you keep on getting recommendations of questionable videos on YouTube which talk about that concept. It is rampant about sleeping, about decision making, about consciousness, about being a good decision maker. But this is a big problem. And almost everybody, including our grandparents who were perhaps did not get the time or potentialities to read scholarly work, will have a theory. So this is what is called lay theory. And lay theory of everything is essentially everybody tries to explain everything. So eventually we have a community which is living in an illusion of knowing. And this is extremely rampant for psychology because of the language psychology uses. And this is the first thing that you have to guard against in this course and in your life. Yeah. You might think that turning to experts is good, so you can ask a psychologist or you can ask a person who is a researcher, but I feel that still you should have some bit of salt in it because experts are also heavily biased. And we now have enough scientific evidence to show that there are biases in experts. Every expert, every domain of expertise. Not every expert, every domain of expertise, there are some experts who are biased. And many of those biases are many times political. They are biased towards things that they think are better. They're biased towards the theories that they work in, or they're biased towards the theories that make up their life, or they're biased towards, their gurus and their schools and stuff like that. So a lot of this bias is a political bias. But then that's where you have to guard yourself from. However, what is our best bet then? So here's the suggestion. We do empirical science. Let's go and test it out. There's nothing better than actually testing it or running experiments. Because that's the only thing for which we have science or we have invented science. Otherwise, there was no point. We could have other knowledge systems to deal with it. We didn't need science. So this is a couple of examples of what I mean by lay theories or everyday theories of everything. So let's say, we are talking about dogs. And I hear this a lot because we do interact with dogs a lot. A random person will come and say, dogs have better memory than kids. How many of you think it's true? Scientifically true. A lot of people I have heard saying this. I don't know if you have heard. But the scientific way or the scientific type should be saying something like this. Dogs tend to show recollection of location cues even after 1 month. See the preciseness of this statement. They are saying what kind of memory, which is recollection, which is location cues. They are saying what way they have measured, which is recollection. They are saying when, which is after 1 month. And now you can go and test kids and say, does kids show recollection of location cues even after 1 month? And you can now compare who is better in recollection of location cues. Of course, you have to have a task which both dogs and kids can do, which is hard, but still it's possible. And then you will be able to conclude whether it is kids who have better memory or you have dogs who have better memory of location cues, not memory in general, and measured by recollection, not memory in general, for a specific time period. So the general, or the lay talk is very general in nature. It does not have details, or it does not have exactness and precision in the information. But science should have that. Otherwise, it's not a good way of doing it. Otherwise, you're slipping into lay theorization. Now, there are a couple of interesting issues here. One is the method of induction. Does anybody know what it? I'm sure you do, but can anybody recollect what is induction? Method of induction in mathematics? This is, I don't know, plus
Try
9.
to draw.
Assuming something and proving something other.
Sorry, can you please repeat?
Try to draw general conclusion from observations, previous observations.
Right. So, we have a method of induction and we have a method of empirical discovery, even in mathematics. Induction fails. Do you know of any example where induction fails in mathematics? No? Okay. You can Google it up or you can ask your maths instructor. But the first part is right. It is based on specific observation. So you observe something once, twice, thrice, or you observe something, for instance 1, instance 2, instance 3, or time 1, time 2, time 3, and you expect or you conclude that the same or similar kinds of observations you can observe at time t5 or t7 or t200. It is a very, very powerful method, especially for infinite sets, as you might know, and for situations where you cannot do empirical science or empirical observations. But if where you can, the first question you should ask is how many observations should I have? And my best example is the pendulum. Does anybody remember the pendulum experiment in high school? I'm sure all of you have taken science, so.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Can you help me tell how exactly you used to do in school?
Sir, it was just you took a pendulum and took some clocks and measured the time period.
No, a little more detail. So, of course, I'm assuming everybody knows what a pendulum is. So essentially, it's a heavy weight tied with a string of a certain length from a certain height.
We used to calculate a certain number of oscillations, for example, 20 for a particular time, and do it for like 10 to 12 times each, 20 oscillations for each, and then come to a conclusion of how much time or what is the time period for the particular pendulum.
Why did any of you think, or did you ask, or did your teacher explain why was this activity a recommended one? Why don't we do it once?
So to eliminate the error.
To eliminate, to increase accuracy or eliminate the error, basically.
So what is the error there?
Error comes.
The error comes when suppose it completes an oscillation and the instance we look at the time, there might be a little difference between our observing and recording the time. So we want to eliminate that part.
So one is an observational error, right? What are the other kinds of errors that can crop up?
Also,
calculation.
Also, it might not be free. It might not be a freely left out pendulum. There might be some force by us, by our hands, basically.
So
Sir,
what
it might be due to the mass of string or air drag that resists the motion of pendulum.
Yes.
What kind of an error is that?
In a particular experiment, the mass is considered to be assumed to be massless. The string is considered to be massless, but in the real world, it has a mass.
Right. Yeah, but I mean the mass of the string of course remains constant for if you are doing the experiment on the same apparatus.
Sir,
Um,
effect of environment. Effect of environment. Sometimes the air speed is high, so that the time will become less.
right. So I'm
Unwanted
asking what kinds
vibration.
of errors are these that you all are mentioning?
They're random errors.
Instrument instrumental error.
Yes, random error is a catch-all term, which basically takes all kinds of these errors, including measurement errors and instrumental errors and environmental errors and other kinds of stuff. Right. So one curiosity I'll have, and then I'll link it to what I think is the best way to do science. Not best way. One important way to do science. Uh, any idea why it was 20?
So
Why
it was
20?
chosen as a larger number so as to reduce the error that we can. For example, if we chose only one oscillation, there was a large possibility that our observations will vary a lot. But if
And
we
so,
take 20, the overall error for one single oscillation would decrease.
Sure.
So
I think
maybe,
20 was also chosen because it was a very convenient number.
maybe
19.
20 eliminates out many of the other factors that might come in play. The number of observations might cancel out to some extent.
Truncation was easier.
Yeah. But did any of you ask your teachers why are you telling me to do 20?
maybe at 20, I think the Poisson distribution approximates to the Gaussian distribution, and that's why.
I'll come to that again. But did
Okay.
any of you, before that, I just have a couple of fun facts as well. So, did any of you ask about why, your teachers about why are you telling me to do it 20 times? Because I assume all of you are from different schools.
Those we were more interested in getting out of the lab, maybe.
True, that's also a big motivation many a times. But now that you think about it, oh, by the way, the fun fact is I've asked this question in different institutions and in India, and almost always, the batch has told me it's 20. So clearly 20 is a number that is being used, I think, across states, across schools in different states in our country. And one simple reason I think it is the case is because they write 20 in the textbook.
yes,
It's a
in
simple.
CBSE,
Yes, sir. In the lab manual.
experiments. So
Yeah, both CBSE and I have done ICSE, and I know friends of CBSE. Both boards write it 20. In fact, some state boards I checked for curiosity, they also write it 20. Some
Sir,
say 30, but not more than.
Sir, so we
and
did it for 5 time only.
Oh, great. Any
Yes, sir.
reason? Was it written 20 or you all, and the teacher ran it for 5 or any other reason for 5?
Sir, I think there is a lot of students so that everyone can do the experiment since there's not a lot of instruments in the laboratory.
So I think the more oscillations are preferable because when we want to know the time period, which will be calculated by taking the average of those the total time divided by the number of oscillations. So if we take more of oscillations, it's preferable to get the more accurate answer, as the greater oscillations cause the errors to eventually cancel out. Like if we toss a coin and we want to see what's the probability of getting heads, theoretically we know it's 50%, but in an experiment, if we toss it 2 times, maybe both are tails, so then we'll say it's 0. So if we keep on doing, we might get 5 out of 11, which is still not the exact answer. But if we keep on doing like this and increase the number of times we are doing this experiment, then it approaches 50% eventually. So increasing it will reduce the error in the overall experiment.
Okay, great. So you see, these kinds of fundamentals are, all of this is true when you are entering into psychological science. And I run this activity because this essentially makes you wear the same hat. Don't take the same hat off when you are doing psychological research. You have to think about what is the minimum number of observations I should have in my measurement, what are the kinds of errors that may or may not crop in, what are the different ways in which I am measuring, and what are the confounds, it's called in psychology, that are coloring my measurements, including me getting different kinds of results at different points in time. And it's also true that you will see in psychology many people say 25 to 30 as a number when they want to repeat um, the number of observations, and that is a statistical regularity of small group sizes about distributions, as somebody was trying to say. So clearly 20 to 30 seems to be okay, but the only issue is 20 to 30 works for small sample sizes or small samples. It does not really well, it's a very vague approximation of a larger distribution, and hence it's not great, but it's better than, because that is where it just starts to look like it, right? So that's where you need to do minimally that number. That's why you have this 20 or 30 even in the pen experiment.
So I don't think ever someone even got 9.81 as an answer for G in the particular, even for 20 or 30. We were always above 10.2 or something. So any amount of observations would be wrong.
Yes, you know that place in Paris, where they keep the exact mass.
Yes.
Um,
a particular platform.
Yes, and it's extremely hard to create the kind of assumptions, scientific assumptions about physics, where you will actually get the measurements, and it's extremely costly. So and that's true, of course. You can appreciate that in a physical measurement. Now imagine how much more harder it is to try to have some kind of coherent or similar or expected kind of measures when you are doing measurements with people, because unlike physical objects, we have all kinds of other noises, both internal to our system and external to our system. The internal noises to our system are different kinds of metabolic activities, different kinds of emotions that we have, different kinds of times in the day, due to the circadian rhythms, which are also hormonal to some extent, and all kinds of other issues, including memory issues, that we might suddenly think of something and just takes us off. And there are a lot of outside noises, including where you are running the experiment, who are people around you, in which culture you are in, which culture you were born, what kind of socioeconomic background you come from. I mean, I don't even know how to list all the possible confounds that are there, both internal to the human system and external to the human system, because of the sheer complexity of both the systems, which are biological systems and socio-economic systems, which are interacting with each other. So that is why technically having a very small number of measurements in psychology is useless. And this we have known in a harder way after what is called a replication crisis, which happened because people were finding these are scientific facts. But then other people came and said, no, it does not hold ground when I do it again. And then we came to know a whole lot of classic findings which seem to be completely misfounded. They're all wrong. You can't trust them. And one reason why they're all wrong is because they're spurious. And you all know already that you will get spurious measurements if you have smaller amount of measurements when you have a lot of noise in the system. Here, we're talking of noise internal and external, both interacting with each other, which is a huge amount of noise. So this is my starting pitch. Now let's take one example to make my point. So this is a standard thing which many of us can relate to. Is it good to memorize just before the test? Right? So some people use the word cramming for that. So does cramming for a test improve performance? And what kind of performance? You have to say, does it improve immediate memory? Immediate means, let's say, one day, which is the exam day, next day, or a few hours, which is the exam hours. And extended memory, which is, you want to learn something and you want to remember it for many years, or all through your life, perhaps, to some extent. So does it Is it a good thing or a bad thing? How do you know?
Sir, it is good for a short time. When we have an exam, we have a tension in that I have forgot about that. So we just open that topic and we read it. But it is only remain up to the exam hours. If you will revise after the 2 days, you will have not remember that topic which you have crammed at that time. Only we have the tendency to learn for the exam only. We all have the tendency to clear the exam by the good marks. So we think that we digest as much as possible before the exam. But if you have the things you have read before the exam clearly by giving the time, then you will remember it by after many days of the exam.
Right. So you're saying cramming improves immediate memory but not extended memory.
Yes.
That's right. Okay. Anybody else has something else?
So if a person has, let's say, learned significant number of, let's say, chapters before the exam, and if he happens to do cramming for the new chapters, so it's a possibility that the immediate memory for those significant chapters that he have done, and if he has not revised just before the 1 day for the sake of cramming, it is the possibility that he may forget some of the stuff that he has been significantly learning just for the sake of cramming for the new chapters as well. So it also depends. Yeah, it depends whether it is essentially improving immediate memory or not, I guess.
Okay. Fair enough. Anybody else wants to add something more?
Sir, it depends on the people and the type of test. Like, if the test includes a big syllabus, then it might not be good. But if it includes a small portion of the syllabus, then it might be better. And also depends on people. Some people uh, do very well after just learning the day before, and some people tend to do it better when they keep on revising the syllabus.
So you mean better in the sense of performance in the test, right?
Yes, sir.
But what is your hypothesis about the immediate memory formation and extended memory formation?
So some people have better immediate memory formation, while it might not be true for others.
So here you are bringing in some kind of individual differences in
Yes.
It is more likely to increase the immediate memory than the extended memory in my case. More likely, I mean.
More likely, yeah. Okay.
Sir,
So yeah.
So I think that
I
if it is related with some mnemonics and some acronyms for learning stuff, then it increases long-term memory as well. But if it is just like facts which have no meaning and somehow I've related it and crammed it up, then it is only for short-term memory, and it highly depends upon the exam which we are giving. Like some exams are more reason-based and they can't be cleared just by cramming.
Okay, great. So any more person to say something?
Sir, yeah.
Yes, sir. Adding to what Tanya said, I would like to add like if we have crammed things and if we know the concept and at the end of the like just before the exam we crammed the definitions or something like in junior school we were asked to write the definition which was given in book. This was done with us. So if we know the concept, then it definitely extends it's saved in our extended memory, but the things which are crammed in most of the cases are just for the immediate memory.
Right. Sorry,
Sir,
was there
also
one more person?
there was sir, one more thing I was thinking that this question that is it good to memorize just before the test? The answer might be also very much dependent on the situation. Like if we just have 1 day before the exam or a few hours and we have not studied anything till now, so then it might be actually good because the alternative would be to know nothing and just go like that. So maybe it's good in that situation. But if you have a week to study and then you're saying should we study just before the exam, then it might be a wrong thing to do in that situation because you can study for a long time during that week and then in the end maybe it's even detrimental to study in and cram because it might make you just more anxious or something. So it might depend a lot on that.
Okay, great, fantastic.
So I think.
Okay.
Sir, I think one of the things that is affecting here is the cause and effect tendency to for us. For example, when we cram, we just fill up our mind with the facts, we don't teach ourselves the cause and the effect regarding the situation. So when we do that, we learn, and hence we remember things for a longer time. But I don't, when I cram, I don't put up the cause and effect thing for that purpose, and so I don't remember it for longer.
All right.
So
So
I think every person has a limited memory, and for example, if we have studied something a few time back, and then if just before the exam, like new memories are added, and we tend to forget that, and if we just revise in the end for and like that becomes fresh, so it might help
all right.
because we have limited memory.
Okay, so I'm very pleased to see that you all. I mean, I don't have to tell this story anymore about thinking like a scientist. You are doing it, of course. As I started out saying that you all are a very special population, or unique population, already being students at IIT Delhi, but you all get the point, right? You are asking, or you are asking or questions, and you are also hypothesizing about how the memory might work out to be, which is the first step to do in science, and you are doing it. Now, my golden question is, how did you all end up saying all the things that you did till now about memory?
So from the information that we have gathered from, let's say, our experience or by reading stuff or from our friends'
So
experience.
basically, anecdotal evidence. What I was talking about.
Yes, yes. So this is exactly the point that we have to talk or take a little more seriously now. So one is introspection, which is own experiences. Um, can you do science by introspection?
Sir, for doing science, we need to generalize our sample that should include a large population, and means we should include every bit of diversity that we can expect in a society. So just introspecting ourselves and doing research can't be that useful. I think so.
So there are people, there are great thinkers in the history of psychology, which Dr. Yashpal is going to touch upon, who started out this way. They introspected about how their own memory might be operating, which is exactly what you all did right now. And it's a very good starting point, I should say. But it's not tenable, because why should I trust you? You might think, remember, this is not exactly how your memory actually operates. This is where you are narrating to me about how your memory might have operated. Right? So one is how your memory actually operates. Second is how you think your memory might actually operate. Third is that you narrate to me about how you think your memory might be operating. So there are these three levels of abstraction. And when I start hearing what you are thinking as if that is probably how your memory operates, then I have all the right to be skeptical. And because who knows, what's the difference between my memory and your memory, even if I trust that you have this unique capability of introspecting about how your memory might be operating, which, by the way, we now know is an extremely hard and almost impossible thing to do. So introspection is something where psychological science started with, but as you all already pointed out, it's not tenable. The second, as one of your friends already introduced, is anecdotal evidence. So these are experiential stories from a couple of friends. Now here, psychologists are divided. Some psychologists think that narratives are useful inputs to understanding psychology. Some think they are not. Those who think they find that narratives or narrations or stories are extremely useful source of information because it gives you a personal perspective about your own thinking. Those who don't, they argue that, well, eventually, these are experiences that you hear from people, and experiences can be colored in more than one ways. So I cannot really trust that as a source of information. Mohit, anecdotal means that it is some kind of an events, like here right now, you noted that some of your friends said that this is what I do, or this is what what has helped me or what has not helped me. So that is basically anecdotes, small stories, experiential stories from people in the society. Now, can we base a theory? Can we create a theory based on that? As I said, some are divided because of this issue of it not being a very trustable source. Although I might also say that it is an important source of information, but it it has its limitations and it has its problems because of the extremely subjective nature of it.
So my question was for this particular anecdotal part, that if when we run an experiment, what we are doing is asking people to tell or experiment on them or ask people stuff and get results, get the data. But we are also doing the same, almost the same thing in an anecdotal experiment or anecdotal way too. So how is it different, and why is anecdotal analysis very far from the truth, or
Yeah,
or not near it, basically?
yes, yeah, yeah. You corrected it rightly. How far we don't know, but see the basic difference between anecdotal and experimental work is that anecdotals are, you know, are narrations by one person. Right? So, in an experiment that you would do, you would try your best to control what you are manipulating. So the one part of it, what you said is right, the other part is not right. So in experiments, you do ask people to do certain things. That is true. But in an experiment, you yourself as an experimenter manipulate what you want to manipulate, which means that if, for example, I want to see what is the cause on the effect, I will manipulate the cause. So for example, I can manipulate stress by making one group more stressed, one group less stressed, and then see how being stressed affects memory. That will be an experiment. For anecdotal evidence, what you will get is you will hear people say, oh, I was very stressed before this exam and this is what I function. You don't exactly know what is the other side of the coin. One person is saying, I was stressed. How do you compare that with that same person who was not stressed, or that same person who was not stressed for some other exam? So the kind of causalities that you, or the kind of causal net model that you can create from an experiment, the control is in your hand because you are manipulating the cause. Whereas for anecdotal, you essentially get a package of a story or a package of an experience in form of a story without any specific manipulation that you did. That's the major difference between experiment, and it's somewhat thought to be of a more questionable form of evidence compared to experiments, because stories are all could be colored in ways that you are not controlling, which is also called a confound, because you don't exactly know, how that experience came about. So yesterday, I'll give you one example. Yesterday, I started watching this web series on Amazon Prime called Panchayat, which is a story about a young person who goes and becomes a Panchayat secretary in an obscure village in Uttar Pradesh, and all the issues with that person. So there's a big problem in the village that apparently there's a tree which is a haunted tree that chases villagers. Okay, and this story comes from and that different people in the village or different villagers narrated to other villages, and now it has become like a community knowledge that okay, this tree is a haunted tree, or there's the existence of ghost. So this guy, who is now the secretary, Panchayat secretary, goes to every single person who claims that that person was chased by the tree to narrate that person's experience. These are all anecdotes. So he goes to six people. Six people narrate their own experiences, which are six anecdotes. Can we conclude that the tree is haunted based on their stories? Later, it shows in the web series that one of the people who also turns out to be the science teacher of the only school in the village, eventually says, yes, this tree was running after me, I saw the tree in the air and it was coming and chasing me, and I ran away to my house. Later on, he adds, that was the first day I tried marijuana. And he kept that knowledge secret to other people because he was a teacher, and it was not so good if people knew that he was smoking weed. But without that weed information, that is an anecdote. With the weed information, that's also an anecdote. Can you trust it? That is where, in your reading, the author makes the point that anecdotal evidences are not as sacrosanct as experimental evidences. Does this help, Mohit?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now what is scientific research and how do you do scientific research for the same thing? You can introspect, which you did. You can have anecdotes, which you also did. Now let's do science, or rather scientific psychology. So what you would do, for example, is you would conduct a experimental study or a controlled study, as it is called, and you will manipulate between two groups of students from the same class. One group of students, you will tell them to cram before exam. One group of students, you will tell them to read this topic over 1 week, which is called spaced out reading. And then you're going to measure different kinds of memory for the same passage and knowledge or understanding of that passage or that concept. So here what you will do, you yourself as a researcher has manipulated the kind of strategy, which is cramming versus spaced out reading. This is an experiment because you manipulate it. So, and then you also set out what exactly will be my memory that I will test, what exactly is the knowledge that I will test. It's not like, memory, because memory itself makes no sense. You have to say what kind of memory, and you also knowledge does not make sense. You have to define what is the knowledge. So in psychology, we call this as operational definitions. We are operationally defining what is the meaning of memory and what's the meaning of knowledge in my experiment or in my study. Only then you will be able to form a proper cause and effect relationship. Also, while you do it, you have to rely on a sample of observations, and as I stressed previously, that sample must be big. Must, because otherwise, the power of the, it's called power, the power of the experiment or study is very low. So I'll just stop with this great person called Karl Popper, whom again we will revisit in Dr. Yashpal's class, who is one philosopher of science. So he says, how do you test scientific claims? So, to be able to do it, you should also end up saying what is a good theory. So according to him and many other people, a good theory must be accurate. Accurate means it should really match real world observations. So it should predict, and we should be able to match its predictions with real world observations. And it also, what it predicts of previous data, it should match the previous data. That's why it's accurate. This is true for any algorithm, by the way, or any theory. It has to be consistent, which means that you can't have a theory and then say there's a whole lot of boundary conditions, which means, okay, it works, but it will not work for condition X, for condition Y, condition Z, condition Z1, Z2, then it's not a good theory. It should have very few boundary or exceptions where it does not work. It better be working for most of the stuff. And this is one place where psychological theories are heavily criticized, and I think it's a correct criticism, which is we have a lot of talk about context. If everything is contextual, you cannot have a good science. You cannot make a contextual science. Science has to have few exceptions. If everything has its own exceptions, then you are not doing science. As simple as that. Scope, it has to be broad, but it's not going to be too broad, because if you are saying something which is too broad, you're basically explaining nothing. It also has to be narrow because it should have explanatory power, but if it's extremely narrow, then it's a very, mundane theory. It's explaining a very small thing, which is better than trying to explain everything, but it's limited in scope, and the theory should be saying it, and it's narrow.
Could you explain why not broad again? Why not broad?
Oh, because if you are trying to explain everything, you are essentially explaining nothing. And so if, for example, you have a very broad conceptualization of intelligence, it gets so big in its explanatory power that it ends up trying to explain everything. And in the process, it explains nothing, because if it explains everything, you don't have, the power to be able to explain the differences that you will observe at different instances of time. So it's a slightly, and this is, by the way, whatever I'm saying is not unique only to psychological science. This is across sciences. So it's also the same things applicable to pure science theorizations also, according to many people of philosophies of science. Then it should be simple. Simple means that it can have multiple explanations, because multiple explanations does exist for a whole lot of phenomena. But what we should choose as a theory should be the simplest explanation. And it's also sometimes called an Occam's razor. The simplest explanation of a phenomena is the best explanation, because the more complex you go, the more observations and the more assumptions you're adding in your theory. So simplicity is always best in theorization. Fruitfulness means it should be useful. What good is some knowledge if it cannot predict the future? Right? So the fruitfulness of research or fruitfulness of a theory is when you can guide the future or future predictions of that area. And the most important part, which is written in bold, is falsifiability, which was given by Karl Popper. And he says that scientific claims can be falsified, while many other everyday claims cannot be or are too costly to check. Falsifiability means if I say a statement, anybody who knows the method should be able to come and test whether my hypothesis is true or false. And the best way to do science is for somebody to say this as a statement, which is an hypothesis, this is what I predict, and everybody trying to falsify it. Everybody should try to find that that statement is not true. If we have eventually expanded and tested all the potential places where it might not be true, but it still holds, then that is the strong evidence that whatever we are saying is indeed true. This is a massive thing that Karl Popper said, and please appreciate the philosophy of it. You want to treat something as false, so go ahead and challenge it and try your best to disprove it. Falsifiability, you can also think about, whether you can prove it false. If once you have proved it false, then it falls down. But if there are multiple attempts to prove it false, but still it holds ground, then that's a good theory. Okay. This is massive, actually, if you think about it. The everyday claims cannot be. There are a lot of claims where you cannot falsify it. And there are some claims where you might be able to falsify, but that's such a big, costly affair that we don't bother to do it. Say, for example, think about this claim. People can be taught to move objects by focusing one's mind on it. Okay? Like this, where you see a lot of this in magic. If you focus your attention, or if you have this inner consciousness, I've heard things like inner voice and good energy, bad energy, spirituality, all kinds of terms. Nobody really defines the term, but even if you have some concept of what the term is, if the hypothesis is that here people can be taught to move objects by focusing one's mind on it, and the end result is that the object does not move, the person can say, oh, the object did not move because you did not focus your mind on it. How am I supposed to know and measure that the person has indeed focused one's mind on that object or not, without being explicit about what is the meaning of focusing one's mind, what is the way of measuring focusing of one's mind? This is what magicians or a lot of people actually end up doing.
So, a question.
Yes.
How much the current technology, plays a role in this falsifying or finding the truth?
Yeah, a lot. I think every science, so science and technology work hand in hand. You cannot really, there are some exceptions. There are some areas where science created theories which were tested by technology later, and physics has a great number of such examples. You might know some of them. But technology does help in scientific discovery a lot. And scientific discovery also helps us in developing technology a lot. So there is a very close, I feel personally, and I hope many of you agree with me, that there's a very strong and close interrelationship between science and technology. And whatever we can prove or disprove in science is heavily driven by the technological advancement of the day. So for example, now the kinds of things that we can do using very modern neuroscientific tools has indeed discredited a lot of psychological theories, because when you say something about the mind, which is you have to say how you are going to measure the mind. And one way people try to measure the mind is by neurosciences. And with the advancement of neurosciences, a lot of these measurements gave different other ways to do it. And also the computer sciences, because a lot of neuroscience is now computational in nature. You have a whole area now called computational neuroscience. And a lot of computational modeling work happens there, which enables us to predict, improvise, and even develop theories simply because of the advancement that has happened in technology, and vice versa. Because you have this kind of technological because you have this kind of a scientific prediction, you also want to develop a technology to be able to test it. And no, it's not again limited to psychological science, obviously. This is true for the whole of science and technology arena.
So technology might be a way of falsifying, proving falsification.
Yeah, so falsification is an activity. You can use any method to do it, and it could be a technological tool that you use to falsify. You could also do it through, sometimes people have falsified claims by behavioral experimentation. Sometimes they have falsified claims using even thought experiments. But the best form of falsification to say that you can actually even falsify using mathematical logic, by pure formalism. So there are different ways to falsify different kinds of theories. In fact, theories in economics and mathematics and physics many times get falsified through mathematics. So you need not necessarily have a tool for falsification, but tools indeed help a lot in any kind of activity, including falsification.
Okay, so thank you.
Sir, it might also depend on the future technological advancements.
Yes.
Like, for example, 100 years back, someone might have a theory that people far away can't talk to each other, and there might be many claims and theories to prove it true. But when phone was invented 30 or 40 years back, that theory might have got falsified.
Sure.
So it also depends on the future technological advancement. Like, it might be true now, but some technology might make it false in the future.
Absolutely. I mean, the one of the largest examples of that is Einstein's theory of gravity.
Sir, one more doubt. Sir, in Indian mythology, Ramayana, we have seen that people were able to move from one place to another through, and later it was that a conversion of mass into energy was the concept. So, sir, this has not been truly falsified till date, but it is expected that we might find a complete theory to explain this. So this is also a theory that we can say that is subject to falsification or not. Conversion of mass into energy.
Yeah, so let's do this exercise. I think this is exactly why I wanted to put this up in the class. This is also there in your reading. There are certain statements which can be falsified. So here, can you pick which of the following hypotheses can be falsified?
So the C statement can be falsified, as one argument can be given that earlier the methods were not very efficient, and now everything is quite efficient and easy to do. So if the time ran backwards, then it should have been the reverse way. Like, earlier the things could have been done easier, and now it should have been tougher.
No, here time, they literally mean time.
Yes. So,
Not time in a metaphorical sense, time in the sense of, um, well, I don't know. If you go to modern physics, of course, time and space are wrapped, right? So, but here, even if you keep time as different from space, still they literally mean time can run backward as well as forward. But when you say, or when you're doing this activity, think about how you will falsify. Falsify means you have to find a demonstration to show that the statement is not true, okay, as it is mentioned on the screen. So please be sure to consider what kind of data will be collected to demonstrate that a statement is not true. Okay, so let's go one by one. Let's say A.
So I just find out.
Let's just do this activity. Is this a doubt about the activity or something else?
Yes, sir.
Okay, tell me.
So while considering these questions, would we have to consider the subjectivity involved in that action, in that statement also, while considering whether that could be falsified or not?
Sir, it's bound to person's choice, not
Yeah,
a general statement.
I have a lot to talk about objectivity and subjectivity because that comes up so rampantly in psychology, which I will do in the next session. But here currently treat it as, let's say, this is just a statement. Okay, so we have no other information. So what is subjective, what is objective, and all that we don't know. This is just an English statement. Whatever meaning you make out of it is what you make. Okay, so let's just treat this as at a very naive level, and from there see. So number A says chocolate tastes better than pasta. Is there any way to falsify it or not?
No, sir.
Okay, any reason why?
Sir, it's just based on a person's taste. Means it's his choice to like it or dislike it. There is no general trend we can find that this he will like, she will not like, she will like this way. We can't make any conclusion.
Okay, anybody disagrees?
Sir, it depends on the situation. Like we are eating too much of sweets, and that time we like pasta, or we are eating salty.
No, no,
Then
forget that's why I said to leave the context thing out. So and it's not about we. It's a statement of the word. Let's treat it that way. Is it a truth?
no, sir.
No.
All right,
We
good.
don't have any
Sir,
measuring for this, like for any technological thing to measure it.
Yes,
yeah,
that's
we
another.
might be able to hook up a person to a device which measures the intensity of brain waves on consuming both of the substances and thus measure the intensity of the taste or happiness that they are feeling.
Yes, we can do that.
Will also
But will it?
vary from person
But
to person.
if we considered a sample of people and another sample of people, so according to their mindset and what they have ate, it depends on that also. So these might not be lenient.
Perhaps a person may say that the person does not like chocolate or likes chocolate less, and we actually find that they get their happiness centers get more intensely simulated during consuming chocolate, and thus they are not sure of what they like themselves. Perhaps with that we can find out something different, and we do not have to rely on subjective measures and can do everything objectively.
Yeah, sorry, what's your name?
So my name is Jivesh.
Okay, Vivesh, could you please remind me to, or rather you can raise the same question when we talk about subjectivity and objectivity. I think you have a great point and we need to spend some more time on it, which we don't have today.
Okay, sir. Certainly, sir.
All right, thanks. So what about B? We live in the most violent time in history.
Excuse me, sir.
It is false. So because
Sir,
because
sir, I
there
have
has
a class.
Time is
Sir, I
over.
have another meet at 6:30.
Okay, so all right, sorry. So let me stop here, but you can think over. Okay, so just tell me maybe somebody which is the one. Can you pick one which can be falsified?
Option D.
D.
One.
B, sir.
Option D.
B.
B,
Yes.
bravo.
Option D. Yes.
Option C.
I think B, C, and D all
I
can
think
be
C, sir.
falsified.
So C and D.
The options.
Sir, none. None.
Many people have voted, and the most responses given to D.
Yeah, so most people say D, but some are tricky, like B and C. So we'll come back to it. I think this requires a little more time. We need to deliberate on. And when we take the subjective and objective thing, we will get back to chocolate and plus, because that's one of the essences of falsification and science, and what newer tools like neuroscientific tools can do and how much it can do. Sometimes it's a hype. So we'll see or at least I will share what I think, and then you all can agree or disagree with it. Okay, so I guess I should stop now. So see you again in the next class.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. What we
Thank you,
do,
sir.
what we have to do as a
Thank you, sir.
what we have to do.